Hi listeners, Jason here. We are excited to finally announce registrations for the biggest psych health and safety community event ever. The inaugural The Psych Health and Safety Conference will be held at the Sofitel Wentworth, Sydney, June 19 to 20, 2024 and offer concurrent virtual attendance. It'll feature live podcast recordings with OG researchers including Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter of Burnout fame, Psych Health and Safety USA podcast host I. David Daniels, Australian super experts including the likes of David Burrows, a special 10-year anniversary integrated approaches to workplace mental health panel with authors Tony LaMontagne, Angela Martin and Kat Page, hand-picked case studies from organisations doing it well, and a very special interview with plaintiff Zagi Kozarov by Catherine Dunlop on that High Court case which we previously covered on the podcast. This event will sell out. Get in quick to secure tickets at early bird prices for the 2-day conference, pre-conference masterclasses, and the VIP dinner. The first 200 in-person registrations also get a copy of her latest book, The Burnout Challenge, signed by Christina Maslach herself. Find out more and register at www.psychhealthandsafetyconference.com. Now, on to this episode.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason Denshi, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How today, Joelle?
I'm relieved that we haven't had a 40-degree day for about a week now.
Yeah, it's quite pleasant outside.
I mean, generally speaking, I would say that 34 is pretty warm, but in comparison to the last month, it's just delightful.
Yeah, and your ginger complexion, probably not great for heat at the best of times.
Yeah, I just try to stay out of direct sunlight wherever possible.
Yeah. So you're like the Wizard of Oz, but instead of water, it's sunlight that makes you melt.
That was the witch, not the wizard.
Yeah, but the Wizard of Oz, the
story.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about the actual character.
Uh-huh.
I was talking about the story, the Wizard of Oz, the witches.
Lots of people in that story. So it was which one? The Wicked Witch of the West.
Yeah.
Except she had green skin.
Yeah, not white.
Yeah.
Yeah, like really white.
Also, I'm not magic, despite how it might look.
Despite external appearances.
Yeah. Not magic, just hard work.
Everyone can appear magical if they just put enough hard work into it.
Maybe.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we've got a hard worker on the call with us today, so we should probably introduce him.
We haven't verified that.
Well, I've seen some of his work. He appears to be putting in the hard yards.
All right.
Going above and beyond, I reckon.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
So he is a semi-professional stand-up comedian, so you know we're going to have a good time today, having performed for over 15 years. He is here today to talk about his other role, though. He is also a communications professional within the New Zealand local government sector, specialising in social media engagement. Welcome to the podcast, Ben Caldwell.
Kia ora. Welcome. Thank you very much for having me. I can empathise with you, Joelle. I am also ginger. And about 15 years ago, I said to my dad I was going to move to Perth and become a brickie over there. And he said, there's no way you're moving there. You will not survive the heat. So I completely empathise and understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. And it's, there's the skin and sun issue, but then there's also just I have a very low range of temperature variability that I'm comfortable in. So I'm usually either too hot or too cold, which is just not great, but...
Yeah, I think you've chosen the right profession, Ben. So an indoor job in New Zealand probably better for you. Yeah, for sure.
So Ben, what podcast do you like to listen to?
I'm mainly into my sports and comedy podcasts. So Fighting Talk, which is a UK-based sporting panel show, which is really, really good. It's a regular listen. I also listen to wrestling podcasts like the Solomon's The Sounds Off, and comedy ones like The Comedian's Comedian, which is by Stuart Goldsmith. And I used to have my own podcast in a previous job, and we're going to be starting our own podcast very shortly here at Rangitikei District Council. So I'm looking forward to that. So that will go to the top of the favourites list as well.
Of course, of course. I listen to The Dollop sometimes, which is pretty funny.
Oh, yeah. No, I have heard of it. I've not listened to it, but I have heard of it.
Can you tell us about your professional career then, please?
Yeah, so I went to Massey University in Wellington. I did a bit of a gap year, worked for a while, travelled overseas, and then came back. And when I first went to university, my ideal was to become a journalist, specifically go into sports journalism. And I got about halfway through my second year of that degree and just realised that journalism wasn't for me. I was not inquisitive enough to sort of keep digging and looking for answers. So I still enjoyed aspects of communications that I was studying, and so I moved more into the creative arts side of media and communications, which coincided with me starting stand-up comedy. So yeah, the idea was that at the end of my uni career, I was going to go into broadcasting and production and stuff like that. It didn't quite work out that way. My first job out of university was as a labourer, and that's when I was looking at coming over to Perth because I saw the money that was getting in from doing that. But yeah, I eventually ended up in comms, and I worked for Kiwi Rail over here as a communications officer, which is very much frontline communications, but had a little bit of corporate experience. And then since then, I've been in local government for close to 5 years now. First with Manawatu District Council and now with Rangitikei District Council. And I really enjoy my job. I really like interacting with people. You kind of have to have that desire to find stuff out about people and learn about what makes them tick and what they're passionate about, particularly in my side hustle as a comedian. But yeah, there's a lot of transferable skills from comedy into comms. And so, yeah, I'm fortunate enough that I've been entrusted to sort of weave the two together, and yeah, I'm really enjoying where I am.
Yeah, that's. It sounds like you must have a reasonable amount of autonomy if you're able to combine the comedy with the comms work. So that's good. Especially, I'm an ex-public servant myself, so I know how some government places can be about
Like humour.
people. Well, having your own personality when you're facing the public. Let's put it that way. Writing with a particular type of voice, I guess.
Yeah, I think that that works within like a corporate setting and a corporate environment and public facing as well in some regards. But in that social media space, it's actually really stifling, and it doesn't create engagement. And the organizations that you see really thriving in that space are the ones that exhibit personality. Whether or not that's a corporate personality or a company personality, or in my case, I'm basically just being a version of myself to the residents out there. Um, it's not too dissimilar to who I am. It's probably just dialed up a little bit more. And I think that it resonates with people because I think comms as an industry has kind of built a rod for its own back. It almost felt like for a while we were trying to complicate things in order to justify our job. And I I think that we should justify our job by just doing simple stuff and getting it right. And so that's what I try and do in the role that I'm in.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely a big role for inserting personality and humour into those, especially into those social media engagements. Like if you look at something like the US National Park social media accounts, people love that because they're funny.
Yeah. See, over here we've got some really good ones, like council ones that are doing really well. Palmerston North City Council, which is nearby, they've done really well for a few years, but their social media manager had moved on to Invercargill City Council, which is right down the south of the South Island. and they're doing some amazing work down there. And even the New Zealand police, like they've really jumped on board, and they're getting like national attention for the posts that they're putting up, and the personality and the humor that they're putting into it. And it's not always just straight funny. There is some really touching moments and really compelling stories, and I think that's where you got to have that balance. But obviously, comedy is a passion of mine, so I try and incorporate that in wherever I see a gap for it to fit in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were talking off air before we started, Ben, about how there's some jobs that just didn't even exist, 5 to 10 years ago, and this would be one. And so it was actually your humour and something I saw you share on LinkedIn that brought you to our attention, and I thought actually that would be a really great topic to discuss with someone who's actually doing that job that a lot of people, maybe be less familiar with. And I know from our own experience, I don't think Flourish DX and the podcast would have as much of a listenership or people engaging with us without our social media presence. So I really understand the value of that. So, it's going to be great to explore, I guess, that with you today and what makes it successful, but then what could also be potentially harmful about working in a role like that too. So how much of your typical workday or week would you say that you spend in social media management?
So I do 30 hours a week with scope to do some more if needed. And I'd say it's probably about half of my working week is on social media. So when I got the job at Rangitikei District Council, I asked them where they saw me adding the most value, and they said in that social media space, it's not something that we've given a lot of love and care and attention to, and that's something that we really see you excelling in and thriving in. And so it's been really nice to just focus on that and put that time and resource into it that previously they didn't have the ability to do so. And I personally would not spend anywhere near as much time on social media if it wasn't for my job. I find myself doom scrolling a lot, and it's not healthy. But because it is my job, I have to be on social media. So just trying to put some limits in place in terms of how I manage that. But the problem I think with a lot of organizations is that they sort of miscalculate how effective social media can be in two-way communication. So probably 5-10 years ago, it was people just put a post up on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, and that would get the message out, and they wouldn't really think about people responding or asking questions back or wanting to engage. And I think now that people are starting to click on to the fact that actually, no, that's important. It's important to go back to people. And for example, we did a thing the other week for Valentine's Day. We just said, come up with your own version of Roses Are Red, Violets Are Blue poem. And I made sure that pretty much my whole day that day was just going through and responding to people that were sending in their own versions of it. Because you want to encourage people in their creativity, and an easy way to encourage that is to give them a like or a love reaction or whatever, respond to their message, or some of the ones that were coming in from other councils, I was actually giving another version of the poem back. So we're getting a little bit of banter that way. I think that people look at that and they see, you spending, maybe 15, 20 hours a week on social media and going, oh, you get to sit and play on Facebook all day, but they don't think about what's actually involved in it, like all the engagement that you have, the analytics, learning algorithms, and all these things that go with it, which is really important in order to maximize the tool that you have.
Yeah. As you say, it's a lot more than just putting a post up there and then forgetting about it, right? It's the interaction that's really important. And I mean, for us, LinkedIn is the social media platform of choice because we're business to business, and that's where most of our buyers will be. I know that engaging with people is super important. not just to encourage them to engage in the future, but also for how the algorithms work, right? If you want more people to see your post, it's important that you have that engagement in the two-way communication.
Yeah. And just quickly, like LinkedIn is becoming one of my favorite platforms because it is a much more positive space than I'm used to. You put a post up on Facebook and somebody goes, will always bring it back to rates, but you put something up on LinkedIn and they'll look at it from that professional standpoint. I'm just like, oh, some praise, yay.
Yeah, and I reckon humour does well on LinkedIn because sometimes people just aren't expecting it because
everybody takes themselves too seriously.
Yeah.
We're serious business people
Yeah.
doing serious business.
So I think, so actually I'm not going to say that, will incriminate myself, but if you say things
That's remarkably constrained of you, Jason.
I know, right?
You actually stopped.
Turning over a new leaf. I could have said it and just edited it out.
Note the date and time, because
was that a New Year's resolution to be more restrained? Was it?
Doesn't seem likely.
No, it's just like AI becoming sentient at some point. Like had to happen. That Jason
became
restrained.
Sentient.
So yeah, but what was I going with that, Joelle?
I don't know. I'm completely thrown.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah, when you are in something that people aren't expecting a certain type of response, like the context actually can really create something that's humorous that normally would be not humorous. So I find on LinkedIn, humor works really well because people are expecting, like Joelle was saying, to be on their best behavior and be serious business people. When you inject a bit of humor in there, it creates greater engagement. And actually, some of my favorite people to follow on LinkedIn, even though it's not technically allowed, are parody accounts where they basically take the piss out of like people being so serious on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I came across I can't remember if it was on LinkedIn or not, but it was like parody of government responses. It was a British account, and it's one of my bugbears as a communications professional is the stock standard responses that politicians give to questions. And there's a case in the moment in the UK where a politician called Lee Anderson, he's come out with some Islamophobic comments, and the politicians just keep saying, he was wrong to say it rather than actually calling it out for what it is, and just repeating that line over and over. And there was a parody account that came out with their own version of it, and it's really, really funny.
Yeah, that's I think that's typical of the one that I follow. Yeah, they take like other people's things, like how they, get up at 5 a.m. and they do like their daily schedule, and it'll just take the piss out of that kind of thing. Just rewrite other people's self-congratulatory stuff that they put. But what platforms then do you use mainly, Ben, in your role?
So we've got Facebook and Instagram, and we are going to soon have a TikTok account. It's a little bit of a weird one. So most local government organisations and central government organisations have sort of been advised not to have TikTok on their work devices. So we found a little bit of a workaround. There's a few little hoops to jump through still. But the idea of signing up to TikTok is to appeal more to the younger demographic that we do have in the district. So our district is about 16,000 people, so not big at all. Where I live and where I've come from where I live in Fielding, which is in the Manawatu district, and that's just over 30,000 people. So, half the size effectively of the Manawatu district. But there is quite a sizable youth population, tamariki and rangatahi and Māori. So what we're trying to do is reach to them on a platform that's a bit more accessible to them and one that they actually use, and just try and get them interested in local government, not necessarily to the point where they want to become involved, but at least have a basic knowledge and understanding of what it is that the council does. Because if you ask somebody who's 15, 16 and had no real knowledge of local government, like who fixes your potholes or who gets the water through your taps and stuff like that, they probably wouldn't be able to answer you. So yeah, it's just more about driving that awareness, because they won't necessarily get involved now, but maybe in 10, 20 years time, they might think, oh, this is something that I want to have my say in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so your policy is actually being shaped by who the members of who you're there to serve, I guess. So, which is as it should be, arguably.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I did when I came on in was I decided that rather than creating a corporate identity or an organizational identity through our socials, because it was just me basically looking after things, that I would just become sort of like a personality, and that came directly from comedy. Essentially, I created a character, and it's called Ben from Comms, and um, I think there was a few other things in Australia, like there was Gary from HR, I think, for
Scotty from marketing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was based on that, and I just decided that, well, I'll just front and center it because I'm used to being in the spotlight in my comedy. Like, not that I'm anywhere in terms of, if you looked at it, I'm not a successful comedian, but or I suppose like a well-known comedian, but I'm comfortable being in the limelight, so to speak, and I don't mind being vulnerable in that sense. I know a lot of other council staff members do have that concern, which is perfectly understandable. So yeah, I just decided, well, I'm going to introduce myself and I'm going to be authentically me, and I'm going to have fun with it. And I did a post quite early on where I just I said to the residents and the followers, look, I've been doing a little bit of research on the towns and the villages here, and this is my conclusion, and made it to be like a bit of a scientific piece. And then it was just a whole heap of memes that I did of like typical things that people from these towns would say and things like that. So that got a lot of interest to start with, and my boss told me that it got her a few phone calls, a few concerned phone calls as well. But
You
the
got to be
success of
borderline to get engagement. So
yeah, the success of that post was really good. So for an account that up until that point was getting somewhere in the region of like 10 to 20 reactions and maybe like one or two comments, we got close to 100 comments and over 200 reactions, and most of it was positive. There was some that were asking legitimate questions about the strategy, and that's fine. We're happy to answer that. And there were some that were saying this isn't what we're here for. But overall, since I started through to now, we've had a net gain of about 700 followers, which is really strong growth. We're one of I think I saw a stat the other day, we're one of the top 10 for growth in local government organisations around New Zealand for Facebook followers. So yeah, really proud of that.
Yeah, and arguably that growth is important because we do see sort of trends of people getting their information from their social media feeds rather than, going and sort of reading the newspaper sites or, goodness, reading a physical newspaper. So yeah, there is definitely an argument for the importance of actually growing your network when you're actually representing sort of what the council is doing. If you're getting that level of engagement through humour and posts that people enjoy reading, then they're also likely to read the posts that are informative and actually telling them things that they need to know as a resident of that council, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very recent development. So yesterday it was announced that News Hub, which was one of the main broadcast news companies, their the proposals going out for consultation with their staff about them closing up. So that would be basically that we have one broadcast TV broadcast news company in New Zealand. So that sets a little bit of a challenge for us to, like, obviously we as a council organisation need that scrutiny, and it's not necessarily that an organisation of that size would scrutinise us a lot. because we are such a small council. But it's something that I'm conscious of, is that we want to give the most accurate information as possible. We don't want to be seen to be as pulling the wool over people's eyes. We're going through a 10-year plan process at the moment, which my boss describes as like a pants pulling down exercise, because everything's there to see. So yeah, it's something that we're conscious of, that when we're putting stuff out there, that we're doing it best practice, but also transparent as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a critical aspect of communicating with your ratepayers and residents. So what are the main activities that you sort of would do in your social media work? I guess, the obvious one is posting and interacting in the comments, but kind of what other activities would you engage in there?
So I do a lot of scrolling, and that when you say that to people, they're like, "Oh, scrolling? What are you on about?" But like, we've built scrolling time into my job, because um, it's important for you to go through the little community groups and things like that, and just find what the people are talking about. So it's social listening in a way, but it's just being done by me rather than like a contracted company or AI or whatever. And then you can pick those things out and respond to them, or you can pick them out and take them to the appropriate manager. Um, Coming up with ideas to engage with people as well. So there's a lot of brainstorming and a lot of writing scripts down, and how am I going to film this video, or is this the best way to put this message across? Is a video the best, or am I going to be using graphics or photos, or maybe we'll just do like no pictures or anything at all. We'll just do straight texts. And it's the social media stuff takes up so much of my time, because it's actually just that bouncing back and forth between people and answering their questions, or getting a question from them, going to the relevant people within the organization and saying, okay, well, what can we tell this person about this question they've asked? And yeah, I very much see myself as an advocate, not just for council, but also for the community. So there's been times where they've come and they've said, well, we'd really like to see this happen. And then I take that information, I give it to the relevant people, and then they say yay or nay, and then I can let the people know what the outcome is of that. We have a customer experience team that do that, predominantly for phone calls and emails and stuff through the website, but people are still using Facebook and social media for that stuff. So yeah, that's one of the areas that I sort of concentrate on as well.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities, or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
So what's the reaction to like or from community members, like in one of those community group pages where they've been talking about something, and there's the council lurking and popping in and saying, well, actually, here you go, here's some information.
Yeah. It depends. So sometimes the responses are, well, majority of the time the responses are nice. People appreciate that you're stepping out of your lane to let them know something. But yeah, occasionally you do get people that are just grumpy, and unfortunately, the conspiracy theorist movement is alive and well. And so you share something, and then instantly there'll be somebody saying, "That's not true. This is the truth," and then they'll just post a link to some like deep state bot or whatever. So yeah, so you have to sort of like peel it back. But yeah, as I say, most of the time it's been good, and we get some good engagement out of it. And there's times where people bring stuff up that is legitimately stuff that we need to know about, or that we can help with that we maybe didn't think about. And so it's really important that we capture that information and pass it on to the right people.
Yeah, and I do. I really like that strategy of actually going and proactively, listening to those different sources of information about what your communities are talking about, because, not everybody's going to be, for whatever reason, not everyone is going to want to actually call or email or write a letter to the council about what's bothering them. Generally, people do feel more comfortable complaining about something in a group setting rather than maybe escalating it, for whatever reason. So, I think that is a really useful source of information, and if it's something that you can actually, act on, then that's fantastic.
We do have a few people that, like you say, they set the bridge alight and then run. Left to deal with the consequences of that. But yeah, for the most part, we're not too bad.
Yeah. Now, Ben, the post that you shared that got my attention on LinkedIn was about an interaction you had with someone who was responding to one of your posts. So it got me thinking around, what are the typical psychosocial hazards in this role that, didn't exist in most companies, and maybe some companies or many companies don't have a dedicated role for social media management either, right? And so our focus on this podcast is psychological health and safety. So what are the things about work, whether that's the design, the management, the social aspects of work, the interaction with customers, residents, that sort of thing, that have the potential to cause employees of a workforce harm? And largely we're talking about psychological harm, right? So, and I thought, well, that incident definitely would have the potential to cause someone harm. So I was wondering, thinking about your role, and particularly because you are customer facing, what are some of the main things that you think would be detrimental to not just your own mental health, but other people working in similar roles?
Social media is all consuming, so there's no real way of switching off from it, especially if you work in that space. And it can be quite overwhelming if something, big happens. So whether that's a natural disaster or a natural event and you're having to deal with that, or we had a little bit of a PR issue to deal with a few months back with the changing of a local festival, the name change of a local festival. And so you bear the brunt of a lot of people's anger in that regard. And it is really hard not to take it personally for me, in my experience. I'm I'm trying to take it professionally, not personally, but it can be difficult. Um, I'm pretty much a heart on the sleeve type person, and I think that like a lot of the people that work in social media are kind of like that as well. There's some people that have the ability to switch off and de-stress from that whole situation, um, regardless of whether it's a positive or a negative one. Um, but I think that you know it's not healthy for you to be constantly surrounded with negativity. If you put that person in an environment where they were dealing with customers or residents or clients on a regular basis, in a face-to-face situation, and they were hearing that stuff and reading that stuff, it would take a toll, and social media is no different. Um, so one of the things that I've tried to implement is, and I set it out quite early on, is that I want our pages to be a healthy part of somebody's social media diet. I don't want it to be something that is like popcorn as such. It's like it has no value to you, and I don't want it to be a toxic place either. So one of the strategies I have is that if somebody is getting nasty on there and somebody is going to be, for want of a better word, a dick to somebody else, then we call them out for it. Because for too often, I think we in local government and professional settings like local government, we think, no, we've got to take the higher ground, the moral high ground, and we've got to be polite and professional and courteous to everybody, and everybody deserves respect. And I agree with that to a point, but if somebody is openly coming out and attacking you, yeah, I think you have the right to stand your ground and say, no, actually, that's not okay. And I'm trying to do it in a way that actually gets everybody on board. So from within the comedy world, like basically I look at trolls as hecklers. So if you've ever been to comedy night, you get a heckler in there and it sort of derails the whole thing. But it derails it not just for the performer on stage, it derails it for the audience that are watching too. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is basically create, well, if you are trolling, you are heckling, and I'm trying to get the rest of the community on board with me. And one of the ways I can do that is inject a bit of humor into it. So sometimes that's, taking the piss out of myself. Sometimes it's, just gently ribbing the other person. Sometimes, particularly with conspiracy theorists, I don't give them a lot of people will just delete and block their comments and, but I will just like maybe give my secret away, but I'll just post a GIF to show my disdain for what they've just said,
Like a
and
tinfoil hat or something like that.
yeah. Well, I had one today where like people were saying that residents need to stay awake, and so I just posted a GIF of somebody going, "I has awoken," and things like that. Just I think that it's actually having a positive effect because whereas before they felt as though they could go unchallenged, now they are being challenged, but they're being challenged in a way that I think that they're not necessarily prepared for, because people who go back with facts, right? And we do go back with facts, but like go back with facts and reason and logic. They don't seem to have the same success as somebody just going be like, well, no, that's not true. You're an idiot or whatever. Um, and I know that that's not necessarily best practice, but I think that there's scope to be able to do that, particularly to the ones that are constantly pushing it. And I got, I was walking in town. I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but I've become a little bit of a local celebrity. And I was
Ben from Comms.
yeah. And so like I was in a cafe yesterday and I was just getting my lunch and somebody came up to me and goes, "Oh, I'm so glad you pushed back against those trolls." And she specifically named one and she goes, "Oh, he's just never gotten over the fact that he didn't win when he ran for mayor." And and so like that's what I'm trying to do is get the others on board to say, well, actually, no, what you're doing is not okay. You're being a dick. We're calling you out for it. If you want to carry on, that's fine. I'm just going to continue to ridicule you. Um, but yeah, I know it's a fine line to tread because we do have people that message and say don't necessarily think that's right or best practice or whatever, and that's fine. They're entitled to their opinion. But it's pretty simple. Like if we're treated with respect, then we'll give respect back. And if we're not treated with respect, then I don't feel as though I have any obligation to show you any.
Yeah, and is that something that is like a formal part of your comms strategy, that tone? And is that something that your like leadership supports then at the council?
Yep. So we've discussed it, and we're in the midst of actually writing a social media strategy as well. So when I came into council, it didn't have one that was sort of like finalised, and so we're developing one at the moment. And yeah, we're just putting it in there that we we want people to engage with us positively, and we will be positive to you if you're positive to us. And it's just simple, basic respect. And you know, if or whenever we go back with stuff, we'll make sure that we're still professional, but there will be a little bit of sass on that line. So yeah.
I'd love to see that formally written in a strategy document. Like, we will go back with SAS.
Yep.
Yeah.
Policy, SAS.
Yeah. So obviously you have, a number of years of stand-up comedy underneath your belt, and you have come across hecklers and you know how to deal with them. You say it could still sometimes have a negative reaction on you. What could like comms teams or other organizations that employ social media managers maybe do to protect their staff who are on the front line and doing that engagement with the community, when we know a lot of social media, people who engage in it, can be quite negative, particularly towards entities?
Um, I think that uh, one of the benefits I have in my job is that I've got the ability and the scope to be able to push back in the way that I feel is appropriate. And I know not everybody has that. I'm fortunate in that, touch wood, I've got reasonably good instincts, and if there's something I'm not sure about, I will run it past my manager. But for the most part, I'm entrusted to go back and respond to stuff. And that's empowering for me. So no, I know that if I'm to respond to this, and that I have the ability to respond to this and not have it be micromanaged. So I think that would help if social media managers are actually entrusted in that. They're seen as the experts in their field. So trust them to be the experts in that field and how to deal with it. Too often we have I've been in organizations where those who don't use social media say, "Oh, well, you've got to respond like this and that, and you've got to do this," and you're just like, "But you don't use the platform. You don't use social media. How can you be telling me how to deal with this as an expert?" Like, comms and social media, they're entwined, but they're not the same. And I think that's where a lot of communications managers are getting a little bit sort of wrapped up in, oh, this is a comms thing. No, this is actually a social media thing. And like, to me, it should work that, if something's wanted to be communicated out by the organization, from the organization, if you've got something that's specifically to go on the social media, somebody from comms or engagement or whoever should go to that social media manager and say, "Hey, this is what we need to put out. These are the key messages. What do you think would be the best way to do that via these platforms here?" And then trust the social media manager to do it. And I think that would really help in terms of responding to stuff. I think one of the things
Just on that, Ben, if I could just pick up on that point, because what you're talking about is directly related to what we call job demands and jobs resources. And when we talk about psychosocial risk management, we understand that some parts of the work are inherently risky. So engaging with trolls on social media, unless there's AI or things that are picking that up and blocking it, which, we're not at that point yet. Trolls exist and they'll continue to have that, say what they want. But if we can't get rid of a risk, eliminate it, what can we do to buffer it with adding some positive aspects of work? So what you've just described there is two things that are really beneficial, which is supervisor support. So your boss is trusting your judgment and giving you support when you need it, like when you're escalating, and then you're able to have a conversation. And then they're also giving you autonomy, right? Like you say, they're not micromanaging you. They're saying you're the expert in social media. This is what we want to achieve. How do you think we're going to best achieve that? And then trusting you to make the right judgment call. So, yeah, I think it's a really good example. And I think our listeners would have picked up on that who listen to us regularly talk about, job demands and job resources. But just hearing you talk about it, it's a perfect example of that, which I thought was really great.
Yeah, and I think another thing that has been really awesome to watch and see, and it's been happening for a while now, but more so in recent times, because a lot of comms professionals in New Zealand are under attack. I know that sounds really dramatic, but like the there were parties that were campaigning in the last election saying that, oh, there's too many comms professionals in Wellington and there's too many comms this way, and specifically speaking about comms as a profession, and saying that we don't need these people, in these roles, which would cause a massive amount of grief to the economy if we were all to go. But what's been happening is a lot of councils have actually been sort of looking out for one another. So we've got some councils locally that they'll put something up and they'll have some trolls come on board, and we'll see them, and will help by jumping in and responding to it. Not necessarily in a a poking way or a prodding way, but maybe they've responded to the person that's being a troll and will come along and say, "Hey, ka pai," or "Well done, that was a great response." Um, and just knowing that, because we are like a small community essentially. If you look at, I think there's like 68 councils in New Zealand, so and yeah, there's obviously more professionals, but if you say there's like maybe a couple of hundred of like that work in that social media space, um, yeah, just looking out for one another and having each other's back when um, stuff like that happens. um, I think is really valuable, and to sort of make you realize that you're not alone. There's other people out there, and there's a lot of other people out there in council organisations that can completely empathise with what you're going through.
Yes, I think it's something else that just kind of popped into my mind while you were talking there. I think there's almost a bit of anthropology that goes into it, right? Because you've got different social media platforms almost have sort of unique cultures in terms of the norms around how do we actually comment? Like, do we text comment and are they serious, or do we largely respond in GIFs and references to kind of long-standing jokes within this platform or within this community on this platform? So I'd imagine that a good social media manager would have an understanding of the nuances of the different cultures or personalities within those different platforms, and actually would proactively sort of shape the strategy around particular messaging so that it fits with those norms. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely, yeah. We see how they interact every day, and we know the ones who are going to comment on certain things, and we know what they're going to say, and we know the other ones that might comment on things and potentially what they will say, and consistent themes and messaging that's coming through. And that's all really valuable intel for the organization for us to have. So I think, yeah, like you say, just studying people's patterns online is incredibly valuable for our organization, and it's something that I think is only now starting to be valued um, by people that are only just starting to get a comprehension of the importance of it.
So, Ben, it's been a really fascinating conversation with you. One of the things, though, we like to ask every guest that comes on the podcast is, speaking about mental health specifically, because that's what our podcast is about in the workplace. If you were to think about maybe within your realm, right, social media management, what would be your hopes for the future of creating an environment that would support people's mental health?
Um, I think what I would like to do, um, one of the things I'm working on is, I'm not sure if you have it over Australia. I'm pretty sure it's a global thing, but Pink Shirt Day, which it's an anti-bullying day basically. It was started in Canada and it's sort of gone global, and um, so there's a Shirt Day in New Zealand, which is normally held in May. And so one of the things that I would love to see that is not just within the workplace, but within the wider community, and then like through workplaces within the community, is like, um, people are people. People are no different than you. So we all have our own struggles and financial troubles at home, or stress with kids, or feeling imposter syndrome or inadequacies, body image issues, anything like that. And I think that, without trying to sound too much like um, uh, a liberal lefty or whatever, but like we've just got to start actually being more empathetic to one another, and putting each other in. Putting yourself in the other person's shoes and actually understanding what's brought on that reaction, like why are they reacting that way. And that's something that I'm conscious of, in responding to people on social media. Um, why is it that they're reacting that way? And a lot of the time, the reason why I use humor is because sometimes that can actually be the icebreaker to get what's actually upsetting or where the hurt is, and you can have that conversation with them. So what I'd like to do is do a campaign around Pink Shirt Day, but specifically around that online engagement, and that social media engagement, um, and just highlight some of the things that our council staff members actually have to deal with, and our elected members have to deal with, which isn't revolutionary. There's lots of other councils that have done similar things, but yeah, just do a little bit of a more of our own unique take on it, to resonate with our community in particular. Um, and I feel incredibly supported in that, by my bosses and the management here. um, and I'm really looking forward to showcasing like what it is that we can do, um, in that space.
Yeah, that's amazing. Not just thinking about the impact that you can have within your own organisation, but for the creating awareness of the broader profession and the I guess endemic of endemic bullying that happens within social media, and the people who that's actually their job. It's not they're not there for fun. They're getting paid to do it. How would you treat a shop assistant, right? Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah,
So some people treat shop assistants
that
very
way too.
poorly.
Yeah, I was thinking that
Yeah,
as soon as I said it, I thought that's
I think in the local government space, it's people just see councils as like this faceless organisation that all we do is you take your rates money and you get nothing for it. And what I'll be trying to do, in my normal comms that I do out to people through social media, but also in this specific campaign, is actually say we're part of this community as well. We we're reflective of you. Because we work here, we live here, we spend our money here, we play sport here. So it's about making sure that it's a welcoming environment for the people that you have that are serving you. Um, and it's not to say like roll out the red carpet and like, oh, thank you very much, but just be respectful, and understand that a lot of the time that the job that they're being asked to do is being there's value to it, whether or not you see their value to it or not. Like one of the common complaints we get is, well, I don't use the swimming pool, so why do I have to pay rates for it? Like, well, because you're a part of a community. That's your contribution to the community that you live in. And if you don't want to do that, then go and live somewhere else, sort of thing. As bluntly as that sounds, it's kind of how I feel about it. And I think that, yeah, we can just highlight that, we're not this faceless organization. We are actually people, and we're members of the community that you're a part of as well. So, treat us no differently than you would your next door neighbor.
So, last question from me today, Ben. Do you have words of advice, I guess, for listeners who are working in that social media space, or maybe people who are managing social media managers? What advice do you have for them in relation to, I guess, proactively protecting their mental health?
Make sure that you switch off from social media, and that's something that I need to do. So I will be trying to take my own advice, but yeah, really switch off from it. Um, Go and do some physical activity or read a book or whatever, but yeah, get off screen, because that will really help. Try and understand that it's not personal, it's professional, again, which is another work on. As somebody said to me at a conference last year, it's not that they hate you, it's that they care really loudly, um, which was a great change in mindset for me. Um, but also, like, make sure that you have somebody that you can vent to as well. I think that it's really important that if somebody is saying something that is really getting to you, vent to somebody before you respond to them, because then your response is going to be filtered, and it'll ensure that it stays within that professional space. Yeah, sure, chuck in a sassy line or whatever, but yeah, vent to somebody before you respond, and I think that will really help.
And that speaks to supportive leadership as well. Like if we're going to be supporting our social media managers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Just also generally good advice if you're responding to an email or anything really. If you need to vent first.
Then
press
deep
send.
breaths.
Yeah. Whereas one friend told me before, like type it out and then read it and then delete it and then type it out a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or now we have ChatGPT for that, right? Can you like make this less sassy in my?
Please make this polite.
See, I've tried ChatGPT and I struggle with the tone settings.
Yeah, nice. Well, Ben, you didn't disappoint. It was a really interesting conversation. And I think we're going to have to get more people who are actually on the front line doing some of these jobs that are quite interesting to come and talk about their experiences because, it's. I think it's probably the first time we've done that. Had a plumber who was he was a boss.
Business owner.
Yeah, he was a business owner rather than the actual worker. So I think it's a really great perspective. So thanks for being the first, I think, Ben, in almost we will be over 200 episodes.
200 episodes.
Oh,
wow.
So we'll have to do more of these.
Thank you very much. I feel very honoured.
Yeah, terrific. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode, listeners. So remember, we do video these with our guests when we do the interviews, and you'll find those videos on the Flourish DX YouTube channel. We also take the favourite snippets, and there was a few to choose from for today that will be on the LinkedIn page for Flourish DX. And while you're over on LinkedIn, you can connect with Joelle and myself if you want to continue the conversation there. And definitely, Ben, who should we be following on social media? Which council?
Rangitikei District Council is who I work for.
We're going to have to put a link in that because I do not know how to spell it. But we'll put a link in the show notes because, it's some great stuff that you're putting out there. So keep up the good work. Thanks again, Ben.
Thank you.
And listeners, we'll catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.